So we'll continue our teaching on how to create inner peace in our lives. And there's this very, very cool story in the New Testament where Jesus, just before sort of the end of his life, he's with his disciples in a room, and they were having a meal together, and then Jesus does a very strange thing. He takes a bowl and also a cloth, and he kneels down and he starts to wash his disciples' feet. And all the disciples, you get the sense from the story, were kind of not sure what was going on and what to make of this, as you can imagine. And then one of them, Peter, obviously, Peter was always the one challenging Jesus, always the one that, stepped out of the boat, walking on water. He was always the one out in front. He said to Jesus there, what are you doing? You're not going to wash my feet. And Jesus said, well, I have to wash your feet. And he said, well, if you wash my feet, wash all of my body. And then Jesus reprimands him and teaches him a few things and so on. And then at the end, Jesus says, I hope that you understand what I was trying to teach you. I tried to set you an example that if I, who's your master, who's greater than the servant, if I can kneel down and wash your feet, then ultimately you ought to do the same thing. You need to go and you need to wash people's feet. Now, I don't know if that means literally washing people's feet, but I think Jesus was trying to teach them something about servanthood. I think Jesus was trying to teach them that as believers, as followers of his way, of his teachings, of his life, we need to have the same spirit within us, the same attitude within us. In recent times, my children have started listening to these songs, these gospel songs. There are, all these Jesus loves me, this I know, all these songs, and it's just booming in our house because we've got this one big speaker and it's quite loud, and so they're just singing out of, just going for it, and it's very, very nice. But every now and again, I would listen to the words. And sometimes, because I used to sing some of these songs too, chances are many of you sang some of these similar songs too, because some of them are quite old. And I would listen to some of these songs and realize that, a lot of the theology and some of these songs are actually not that accurate. One of them that I used to sing, and I still sing it, is the whole idea of, Jesus who lives in my heart, Jesus who comes into my heart. And I used to be, I was taught the same way. And, if you look at Revelations about, look, I'm standing at your door and I'm knocking, and I was taught about opening the door of your heart and that type of thing. But I realized over time that it is easy to step into that trap to believe that Jesus only lives in my heart. And then we just sort of park him in my heart, and that's where he stays. See, Jesus never called us to get him into our hearts, but he called us to follow him. He called us to take up his teachings and what he did and then take that forth to make more disciples. And as I've been teaching you, and as many of you would know, a disciple is somebody that looks at his rabbi or looks at his teacher and does exactly the same as he or she does. That's how discipleship worked in the ancient days. And so when Jesus calls you and me as disciples, he's not just asking us to believe in him. Many people believed in him. In fact, it says in the scriptures that even demons believes in him. But obviously they don't follow him. And so at the end of the day, really discipleship is about understanding that Jesus was trying to teach us about a way of living. And it's the same thing that he was trying to teach to his disciples on that night, that his way, the kingdom way, is about having a spirit and an attitude that is not about ruling, it's not about authority, it's about serving. It's about kneeling. It's about getting alongside people wherever they are in life, whether they're broken, as Jimmy prayed earlier, and especially when they're broken and they're down and out. And we see this throughout Jesus' life. Not only did he spend time in the synagogues on the Sabbath, but he spent most of his time during the week in the marketplace with people that were down and out, and not just the fancy and the rich people. He spent time with women and children. We see it over and over. And I think Jesus is encouraging and teaching his disciples to remember this, because he was always obviously telling them that his time was drawing near, and he was telling them that when I leave, this is what you've got to go and do. Earlier this morning, I read you this passage in Matthew 20, where Jesus, the story where disciples were fighting about who was the most important. They had this argument about who was important, and they were quite upset about this mother who asked Jesus about her two sons, having to sit at his side, both on the sides in the kingdom. And Jesus teaches them this idea that, look, in God's kingdom, And I'm just laying a foundation here for us this morning. But it's really important for us to understand, before I get into what I want to talk about this morning. In God's kingdom, if you want to be great, you've got to understand that the greatest serve. The greatest is not those who sort of sit on a throne and they sort of rule over people and they lord over people, as to use the words that Jesus used. But there are people who are willing to serve. They are willing to be slaves. They're willing to serve others as servants. If you want to be first, then you've got to understand in God's kingdom, you've got to be last. You've got to be willing to have the attitude of a servant, the attitude that's willing to put yourself to the side for a moment, forget about your needs, forget about your wants and your preferences and your stuff, and focus on the one that you're serving. That's what Jesus did. Jesus oftentimes put a lot of, things to the side. He overlooked many of the laws. He overlooked many of the things that were supposed to be right. He sort of parked a lot of things to the side so that he could love people and serve people. Now, obviously, as I was growing up, one of the things that I used to struggle with, and I also know that a lot of my friends struggle with this idea, is that I was taught about the whole idea of serving and servanthood. But one of the things that's unfortunate is that, throughout in the church where I grew up, maybe again it was just the way that I paid attention. As a kid, you don't really pay attention. So, I got some of this stuff just halfway, so my ministers were quite well trained and stuff. So anyway, and just in case they're listening to this later on. And anyway, so one of the things that I got out of this whole thing of being a servant is the idea of being weak. One of the questions that I oftentimes had, and I know a lot of my friends also had, is that, well, if you're a servant, if Jesus says you've got to serve people, you have to be a servant and sometimes even be a slave, does that mean that you become a doormat for people? Is that what God wants? Is that you always put yourself second, you never look, never take care of your own needs, never worry about yourself. We're all going to be like Mother Teresa, and we're all going to be, just in Calcutta, or we're going to go through life as doormats, just allowing people to walk all over us. Well, that's the question I used to have, and so this whole idea of being a servant didn't really do it for me. But the point is, when we look at Jesus' life, Jesus never was he never was a doormat, was he? I mean, you never get a sense that people walked all over him, do you? I mean, Jesus was the strong character, but there was a sense of humility. There was a sense of divine presence you get in the scriptures when you read the stories. There was a sense that Jesus could sit down with children and be equally okay with that as when he sat down with some of the highest learned rabbis and spiritual teachers of his time. Jesus was equally at place and okay with both these places, being in both these environments. And so Jesus never really portrayed weakness. And I don't think that is what being a servant actually means. And maybe this is something that you have dragged along with you also, like I have, that, if God says you've got to be servant, you've got to be weak, you've got to, sometimes just always put yourself second, but I don't think that's what it means. I think being a servant actually means having a spirit and having an attitude that is willing to put yourself second, that's willing to overlook your stuff sometimes in order to inspire people, in order to empower people, in order to lift people up. Because that's what Jesus did if you look at his life. Jesus lifted parents up, he lifted children up. When the disciples reprimanded them and the parents said, no, take them away. Jesus said, no, let them come to me. And he lifted those children. Just imagine, those children were always the last in that world. Suddenly one of the great recognized figures of their time, he invited them, come sit on my lap. Just imagine, probably like sitting on Santa Claus' lap, when you're a young child. Just your dreams come true. And for these kids to have that experience, just imagine lifting them up. That woman that was brought before him, that the people wanted to stone because she was was accused of adultery. If it was anyone else, she probably would have been stoned, would have been killed. But Jesus takes a different path. He writes in the sand and he turns it around and he puts it on them and says, those of you who are without sin, throw the first stone. And he lifts this woman up. And I can just imagine that she would have left that scene or that moment and her life would have changed. I can just imagine that, especially in that world. It would have been like somebody that was, literally on death row and somebody coming in and just forgiving them, setting them free and saying, you're clean. go on your way, just don't sin anymore, just go and change your life. And so Jesus constantly inspired people, constantly lifted people up. And so when I nowadays read about God asking me and challenging me to be a servant, that's what I see. And so today I want to share with you 5 things, 5 ways or things that I reflected on this past week of how you and I can grow as servants every day, but in a sense of how we can inspire people every day. See, as people, and I've seen this in counselling many times, oftentimes when you and I go through things, when people go through things, people start to forget the value that they have. People start to overlook the treasure that is within them because of their environment or their situation or what's been put on them or the labels that have been put on them or whatever the case might be. And I want to give you today a sense of value. I want to give you a sense of your own worth back by challenging you to look on the inside and trying to get you to see perhaps how God's seeing you and to understand that it doesn't matter what you believe about yourself. It doesn't matter where you are in life right now. It doesn't matter what you're facing right now. It doesn't matter what you're going through right now. It doesn't matter where you are on your journey right now. You can inspire people every day. It's just a matter of believing it and claiming it and living it every day. Now, one of the first things that I would say when I reflected on this, one of the first things that you and I need to do every day in order to step out into our daily lives and then to go out and inspire people. Again, whether you're on the farm, in your business, whether you're at home, whether you're at some knitting group or whatever the case might be, whether you're just, when you're a parent, it doesn't matter. In order for you and I to start our day and step out to inspire people, the first thing you and I need to do is we need to be open to be inspired by God Himself every day on a daily basis. It says in the scriptures, in Psalm 46 verse 10, it says, "Be still and know that I am God." I once heard somebody talk on this very passage, and this guy spoke about it quite lengthily, or in a lengthy way. Now, I'm not going to do that. But he did emphasize 2 things. He said this one sentence actually has more to it than we imagine and than we realize. The first part, this first commandment in a sense, or the first call on our lives is to be still. The only way for you and me to be inspired by God's Spirit in order for us to step up and then inspire people around us and serve people, the first thing you and I need to do is to become still in our lives. I've talked about solitude and silence many times in this congregation. We need to become still before God and before the Lord. We need to allow His Spirit to speak to us. But when we become still before Him, we also need to know that He is God. And the speaker talked about it, and he said, it's about this quiet assurance. It's about this quiet knowing that it's not just about being quiet. It's not just about being still. It is about knowing in whose presence I'm sitting. It's about knowing that the one in whose presence I'm sitting is all-knowing, it's all-present, understands and empathizes and loves and grants peace and hears our prayers. It's about a quiet assurance sitting in the presence of the one that we know is a creator and is God. But the question I had this week is, how many of us and how much time do we actually make being still before God and actually just allowing ourselves to know in His presence we are? See, I know that many of us do spend a lot of time with God, but I also know from my own experience that I do a lot of the talking. The problem is when I do a lot of the talking in my relationship with God, there's not much room for listening. And it says in the Psalms many times that we have to meditate on God's word daily, day and night actually it says. We have to be still. We have to be quiet in His presence. We need to allow Him to speak. It says in different scriptures that God speaks in the whisper, He whispers almost like in the wind. And so in order for you and me to really be inspired by Him, we need to make the time. There is no way, and I've tried this in my life and it doesn't work. There's no way where you and I can just stay busy, regardless of what you're busy with, but we never make time to be still and know in whose presence we are and be inspired. Literally becoming in spirit. That's what that words mean, to be in spiritus, to be in spirit. There's no way we can do that. Now, as modern day people, a lot of us maybe from a younger generation, we try this. And we're always loud, and we're always talking, we're always singing, we're always expressing, we're always go. The problem is that we cannot be inspired if we never make the time to be quiet and still and just sit in the presence of the one knowing in whose presence we are. That's the first thing. I wanted to emphasize that. I wanted to talk that much about the others. But for me, that's the starting point. In order for you to step out tomorrow or after this service and you go back into your marriage, you want to go back into your household and you want to start inspiring, you want to be like Jesus, serving, sitting down with, doesn't matter who you sit down with, and you want to inspire people, lift people up, raise people, in a sense, help them see the divinity within them, so to speak, what God has planted within them. In order for you to do that, you have to see it within yourself first. You have to experience it within yourself first. You have to be open for God to speak into your life. The second thing, which is more practical perhaps in order to inspire people every day, is to act with kindness. The challenge I want to put in front of you, and I know many of you, if not most of you, do this very well. And that's one of the things that I love about this group of believers, family of believers here at Trinity, is that we need to look for opportunities to help those around us and also bless those around us. See, when we inspire other people, something happens. Some experts call it the law of reciprocity. When you and I go out and we inspire people by helping people or blessing people, something weird happens. When people go through that experience of being helped, it creates something on their inside where they now want to pass that on to others. They want to help someone else. And so when you and I help people, when we step out and we bless people and we set something in motion, I believe in the spiritual realm, we'll see that in the physical dimension also. I truly believe that. So one of the things I typically do is if I drive past some people that I just, feel that I need to do a prayer for them or just bless those people, I do it in my car. They don't even know about it. But I do something in the spiritual realm to bless those people. I drive past a house and something, I need to do something for that house. I don't know who those people are, but bless those people, Father. Let them experience your presence and your love and your healing, whatever it is right now. And just do that. Set something in motion in the spiritual realm and let it come to pass in the physical. But you don't control that. But we also need to help people in a physical way. And ultimately, when we do that, we inspire people to then go and inspire other people. It's almost like they're paying it forward. Now, in the scriptures, Jesus teaches at some point, Luke 6:38, and I've read this passage many times, he says that when we give, it will be given to us. So there is an added benefit to actually acting with kindness. Not only do we set something in motion in the world around us, in a sense, when you and I act with kindness, that same kindness will also come into our lives. So I'm not saying go and act with kindness so that you can experience kindness, but when you and I go through life with a spirit and an attitude of serving people, of acting with grace and with kindness, and I cannot emphasize this word kindness too much, because sometimes you and I as Christians can have the greatest intentions, but we can lack kindness. And when we lack kindness, that's when people experience us to be judgmental and rude and all these things that Christians are sometimes judged or accused of. And so I want to challenge us that we need to reclaim this for us, is to step out every day and act with kindness. And it starts with our dog, doesn't it? It starts with our children and our wife. This challenged me greatly this week. Is that if I truly had to ask them, how kind do you guys experience me? Maybe the answer I'm going to get back isn't that awesome. But that's okay, because if I want to truly experience peace in my life, I need to step out in kindness and act in kindness. And it starts by doing it consciously every day, making it part of my daily goal. It doesn't matter what your job description is or what you're going to be busy with that day, but it's to help people that you come in contact with, to bless people that you come in contact with. It also says in Galatians 6 verse 9, these awesome words. It says, never get tired. Another translation says, never get weary of doing good. Because at the end of the time, at the end of the day, we will harvest when the time is right. We will reap a harvest at the appropriate time. And so there's another added incentive for you and me, is to step out and serve people, help people, act with kindness. Because not only will that same kindness be granted to us, probably from God or other people in life, but also we will reap a harvest at some stage. And it doesn't say what the harvest is, and I don't think we should put anything on that. But the Scriptures does teach us a spiritual principle here, that at the end of the day, when you and I serve, we will reap a harvest if we don't get tired of serving. But of course you will get tired of serving when you serve for the wrong reasons. When you serve to get, when you give to get, if that's your intention, you'll get tired when you don't get. And I've been there and I've lived that. And it's not very awesome, as I always say. At the end of the day, we need to give because that's what God calls us to do, and because it does something within us when we give, when we act in kindness. The third thing is to start our days every day, and also close our days every day with gratitude. See, in life, you and I can do life in one of two ways. And I see this with the modern day person more and more. I see it with younger people more and more. A lot of people in society today, live with this, what I call sense of entitlement. And I see it as a disease, where people feel that they're entitled to things that they never earned or never deserved or never worked for, and so. But this becomes very dangerous in the spiritual realm when you and I start living and going through life with this sense of entitlement, that God owes me, or life owes me, or the world or the universe or whatever you want to call it owes me. See, you and I can go through life and we can start our days in two ways. The one is we can start with entitlement, is that the world needs to pay me something today. The world owes me something today. The world better be out to serve me today. Or we can start alternatively with gratitude. And when you and I start with gratitude, something changes within us. See, gratitude creates what I call a sort of an attitude of openness, to not only give more to others around us, but also to receive more. What do I mean by that? See, the moment you and I start our days, and I know some of you are doing this religiously every day, you start your day with gratitude, with a prayer of gratitude and true gratitude, and you end your days with true, sincere gratitude. When you do that long enough, it's almost like something on your inside starts shifting away from what can I get in life, meaning that stress and all those things, that chase us, and peace that then escapes us. You start moving away from that, and something shifts on the inside where you start looking at your life, realizing every day that even this very moment that I can pray and feel this gratitude is grace. And me seeing and picking up my children right now is grace. It's seeing my wife and seeing my husband or my spouse, my partner, it's grace. Being able to stand up, walk to the jug, switch it on, make a cup of tea, it's grace. I can use my legs, I can use my arm. Tasting the tea, it's grace. I can see, I can hear, I can taste it. Just talk to people that have lost mobility. Talk to people that have lost family members, children. Talk to people, and you realize that the things that we sometimes are grieved about, the things that we sometimes complain about, are much more grace than we realize. It's much more of a gift than we realize. But when you and I start our day, and we end our day every day, and we start building this into our spiritual journey every day, where we make the time to start with gratitude, even if it's for one thing. Lord, thank you that I can open my eyes today. I get one more day, or maybe half a day, I don't know, but I get this moment. When you and I start doing this, something happens on the inside of us. And it shifts us to not only then go out and be more inclined to give to others, because we realize what we have has been given to us. But in a sense, it's almost like the moment our hand opens, we also open ourselves up to receive more. People who are grateful tend to receive more in life. I know this for a fact, because I've experienced this in my life. People who go through life and they truly on the inside just grateful for what they've got, it's almost like they never lack. I have family members like that. They never had heaps, but they never lacked. There was always enough. More than enough, actually. And it also creates humility when you actually start your day and finish your day with gratitude. When you start thinking about the things and the blessings you've got, it changes you, makes you humble. It makes you appreciate what you've got. That creates peace on the inside. Number 4 is a way to inspire people is to actually live peaceful lives. That inspires people. See, being at peace, when I think about peace, it's really about avoiding conflict and confrontation. When you and I start going through life like that, we avoid confrontation, we avoid conflict, kind of like what Jesus was teaching us. You know, in a sense, what it does is it inspires people around us. We live in a world of conflict. We live in a world of confrontation. We live in a world where people aren't going to get one over me. And we retaliate and we take revenge and we do all these things. But the way of the kingdom is a different way, isn't it? The Apostle Paul wrote at some stage to Timothy and says, look, as a leader of a church and as a Christian, he says this, avoid foolish and stupid arguments, for they only start fights. But isn't it interesting that when there's a debate on the table, Christians are first in line? Now, we just love confrontation and these type of things, especially when it comes to God. Because I need to prove to you that my God and how I understand is better than yours, or you are wrong and I'm right. But yet the scriptures teach us that that is not the way of the kingdom. Avoid these foolish and stupid arguments. It only leads to one thing: fighting. And fighting is not the way of the kingdom. You cannot fight in the name of God. You cannot do it. It is not part of the way of the kingdom. It's not scripturally true. Jesus taught a different way. And when you and I go through life, and I don't know if you've ever been around a person that is peaceful, someone that is peaceful, but there is a quiet power about those people. You can never suck them into an argument. You can never draw them into some foolish debate. You can never sway them to sort of, become part of this fight that you want to pick with them. There's just this quiet assurance about them, this quiet knowing, and what you really get you is this smile they sometimes have. When you go on and on and on and they just smile. And Jesus teaches us, the scripture teaches us about this, is that we want to inspire people. We need to be different from the people we live amongst. And one of the things that we definitely need to do as modern day people, living today anyway, is to be peaceful. See, belligerent people who are filled with anger, people who are filled with hostility, people who are aggressive. Funny enough, they also send out an energy around them. As peaceful people send out that quiet power and energy, these people also send one. But it's a different type of energy. It is sort of an energy that adversely affects people around them. I don't know if you've been around those type of people, but their lives are always filled with stress, always turmoil, there's always a fight, there's always something that's going on. But at the end of the day, that does not inspire, that does not put people into a place where they live in spirit. In Hebrews 12, verse 14, it says, make every attempt to live peacefully with everyone and be holy, because without holiness, you won't see the Lord. And so we as people oftentimes step into this trap. As Christians, we struggle to see God in our lives or at work in our lives. And it's not because he's absent. It's not because he's not working in our lives. Perhaps it's because our focus is in the wrong thing. Perhaps it's because we do not live in peace with people. Perhaps it's because we do not strive for holiness. And without that, we cannot see him. And so my challenge to us is that if there is an area in your life where you are not at peace, an area in your life where you are in turmoil, where you are fighting something, where you are still angry, where you are, living with hostility or whatever, do not try and overcome the bad or the evil with evil, but overcome it with good. And I'll close with this, and I have a reading for you which I'll finish with. The fifth way that we can inspire people comes down to our vision here at Trinity, to be salt and to be light to everyone around us every day. To be salt for me means to build others up. See, salt brings out the flavor in food, and that's what I think Jesus taught us, is that we need to bring out what's within people, not break down what we see. And the second thing is we need to be light, and for me, to be light means to be hopeful and to be hope for people around us. We see a lot of people that are without hope. New Zealand's got one of the highest suicide rates in the world of developed countries, especially among young people. Why is that? A lot of them don't have hope. A lot of people in our society don't have hope. I see many of them in counselling, don't have hope. In order to be light as Christians, we can't just be here in our bubble where we have a good time on Sundays. We need to be among people, and we need to be those who are with hope, not live with like people that are without hope, as the Apostle Paul taught. And to be hope is, you do two things. You are hopeful, meaning you are optimistic and you are positive. You are faith-filled. It fascinates me when we as Christians go through life and we are down and out and we don't know. We don't have to know because we know the one who does know. And the second way that we can do that is to show a new way. That's what it means to give hope to people, is to show them a new direction. If you come in contact with someone and you build a relationship with them and you know that they don't know, show them a new way. Some people just do what they know best to do and what they've been taught, but it's not necessarily the best way. Sometimes you just need to get alongside them and show them. And I'll finish with this quote or with this reading, and then we'll close our meeting today. Inspire people. So this reading is called Bringing Light to the World. God and man are the ultimate creative team. God is like electricity. A house can be wired for it, but if there aren't any light fixtures, what good does it do? If God is seen as electricity, then we are his lamps. It doesn't matter the size of the lamp, or its shape, or its design. All that matters is that it gets plugged in, as I said earlier on. It doesn't matter who we are, or what our gifts are. All that matters is that we are willing to be used in his service. Our willingness, our conviction gives us a miraculous power. The servants of God bear the imprint of their master. Lamps without electricity cast no light, and electricity without lamps cast no light either. Together, however, they cast out all darkness and bring light to all the world. It was written by Mary Ann Williamson.